I'm slowly learning how to, when God prompts, is like, okay, let's go engage in this, even if I don't know where it's going to go. I can't plan it out, can't map it out. Just be a part, respond to what God's doing.
Hey friends, welcome back to Coulda, Shoulda, Woulda. This is a series of short videos where I and a speaker, someone who is an apologist, who's an evangelist, who does this regularly for a living, joins me on the show where we talk about times when we coulda, shoulda, or woulda done something in an evangelistic or apologetics encounter or whatever it might be, whether from the platform or private conversation, where we coulda, shoulda, or woulda done it differently. We reflect on our mistakes. We reflect on sometimes our omissions, things we didn't say, things that we did say, or maybe even our tone, and say, how can we do it better the next time? And the goal is to encourage you, our viewers, listeners, to stay in the game, to get in the game, to don't let these things paralyze you, because we all make mistakes, no matter how many qualifications we have, no matter how much experience we have, we all make mistakes. But when we reflect, when we seek the Lord and we reflect on these conversations, and think about how we could have, should have, or would have done it better the next time, we end up doing it better the next time. Now, this is part 2 of a conversation I began in the last segment with my friend, Dr. Jeff Zweerink. Jeff is a PhD in astrophysics, and he is a senior research scholar with Reasons to Believe. And you can find out more about Jeff's work. You can search, by the way, Reasons to Believe has this quite robust, amazing website, reasons.org. And if you want to search for virtually any topic on the interaction of science and faith, and they have such a library of information, videos, articles, you name it, it's on there. They have a great show called, I think, the 2819 show, I think it's called, based off of Matthew 28:19. There's so many good resources at reasons.org. I encourage you to get some time on that website. You might find yourself in a black hole where you're sucked into it and you can't seem to get yourself out because the stuff is so good. So that's at reasons.org. And I'm joined by one of the scholars who is part of the team at Reasons to Believe, Dr. Jeff Zweerink. As I said before, Jeff and I have spoken on numerous occasions together, and I've always admired the honesty with which he approaches some pretty difficult topics and some tough data. Last time, Jeff, you were on, you teased a little bit about an encounter you had where you were traveling with somebody and you wanted to ask them, you were prompted to ask them something or to begin a conversation about faith, but you didn't. And I know that's something that so many of us can relate to. I'm going to share one of my own stories soon, as while we're talking as well in a couple of minutes here. But share a little bit about that story and sort of some of your reflections since then.
Yeah, so the encounter happened when I was in graduate school, and it was a few years into graduate school, so that wasn't like this was just kind of new in the environment. But my research at the time was in very high energy gamma ray astrophysics, and the telescope we were using was down in southern Arizona. And to get to the telescope, you had to take it's about a 20-kilometer drive up a mountain. And so we're driving up this mountain road. And on this particular occasion, the leader of the collaboration, and again, this is the fellow who put very high energy gamma ray astronomy on the map. And, I've encountered other people in times where it's like, I'd make reference to this person. It's like, oh, you know that person? I was like, yeah, I worked with him. And I mean, there's nothing about this fellow who was, arrogant or, I'm better than you. There's nothing in his demeanor, but that indicated that. But as we were driving up the mountain, we were about halfway up, and I just got this prompting, hey, why don't you ask him what he thinks about Jesus? And, this is just one area where I wrestle. It's like, well, he's my boss and I shouldn't do that, or he may know more and I shouldn't do that. And so I spent about a minute or so having this argument in my head about whether I should or not. And in this particular instance, the doubts and fears and anxieties got the best of me, and I decided I'm just going to ride in silence, or who knows, I may even ask something else just to kind of derail that train of thought in my mind. But it was just one of those instances where I look back and it's like, okay, here's God prompting me to step up and just say, hey, ask the question, start the conversation. And I let my fears and worries and anxieties get in the way. instead of just engaging because I didn't know what was going to happen afterwards.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so many of us can relate to that. I can relate to that specifically myself. Um, uh, it doesn't even matter how long you've been doing this. There's times when you feel like this is not the right moment, and you give yourself 10,000 reasons why that is. And you suddenly realize just how fast of an arguer you can be when you're talking to yourself. How many reasons could flood in your head as to why not to do something? It happens so often. Um, uh, if I can ask, in that moment, clearly it's something that stuck with you. This is the kind of encounter that because you didn't say something that has stuck with you. So why is it stuck with you this long? And what do you think we can take away from that?
Well, I think it stuck with me because it's one of those times where, yeah, I do think God was saying, hey, do this. And isn't it just an area of disobedience where I just chose not to? And again, I love your comment about the how fast of an arguer you can be, and I've even recognized at the time, if you'd asked me how often the arguments I play in my head sound really good until I say them out loud. And so if I'd have sat out in the car just out talking to myself and said these things, I'm like, that sounds stupid. Why am I doing this? But nonetheless, I let them convince and get me there. But it stood out because here's this chance I had to be a part of something God was doing. I don't know what God was doing because I chose not to engage what He's asking there. But here, God was inviting me into a chance to be a part of this fellow's spiritual journey, and I just didn't get the opportunity to be a part of it. And
Mm.
I mean, I'm a father, and I've had numerous kids, and there are times where I'll say, hey, why don't go do this, and I'll get those same arguments back from them that I was giving myself. Well, I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to do this. I don't know. I can't. And what I'll tell them, it's like, sometimes I don't want to tell them all of what's going to go on just because I want them to be part. The joy is in the journey. It's like I want them to step out and try, and they're going to see that I'm going to step in and take care of them when they don't know what to do or whatever. And God was just giving me an opportunity to do that, and I didn't take it. And so I have tried to be more recognizing when that comes up is like, there are times where, hey, go apologize to this person. I'm like, I don't want to apologize to somebody, but it's like I'm slowly learning how to, when God prompts, is like, okay, let's go engage in this, even if I don't know where it's going to go. I can't plan it out, can't map it out. Just be a part, respond to what God's doing, and get to watch Him work. And there have been times where I've been able to do that on interviews or times where I've interacted with somebody, and it's like, wow, that was pretty cool to see what God did there. And so
Yeah.
I've learned more. I still have the same dumb arguments in my head about it, but I've
Yeah.
learned to be a little bit more trusting when God says, hey, do this, to try and step out and just be a part of what He's doing.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that as I'm still learning. I can share a story real quick too. Is that this happened not too long ago, actually, probably within the past 5 to 7 years, where I was sitting at a restaurant with some friends, and we were at a Korean restaurant, and our server was bringing the food out, and it was Korean barbecue, so they have always little tiny side dishes that they're bringing out, and the person I'm with, one of the people I was with, struck up a conversation and made a comment about faith. I think we were praying for our food, and she came over and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. We were praying while we came over. We weren't trying to be rude." She said, "Oh no, that's fine. That's okay." And he asked her something like, "Well, do you pray?" And which is a great question. What a great question to ask. What a great inroad. And she said, "Well, I'm Buddhist, and I know how to jump into the conversation. I've done it before, and I've done it unprompted before. But for some reason, with this one, I felt like we just need to be done with the conversation." And I didn't say, he didn't feel that way. The guy I was with didn't feel that way, which I'm glad he didn't. He kept going. But I was like, boy, this woman's going to serve us food really soon. If we say the wrong thing, who knows what we're going to get? She didn't show any indication of being that kind of a person whatsoever. But you do that. And friends, doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. There's this time when you feel like today's not the day or now's not the time. And sometimes you're right. But if it's usually because of fear, you're usually wrong. That's the wrong reason. It might be another reason is to say, maybe ask a question, not dive into it. But I can tell you that even today, and I've done this many, many times, even today, there are times when I make those arguments in my head because now's not the time. And it is the time. I just convinced myself it wasn't. So if you've done that, don't beat yourself up too much, but don't do it too often either. Get in the game, listen to the prompting. The joy is in the discovery. The joy really is in the discovery of what God is doing in the midst of that moment. So, Jeff, that was a wonderful story. Thanks again for sharing this segment of Coulda, Shoulda, Woulda with us. I hope we can do it again, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon, my brother.
Well, thanks, Abdu. Really enjoy our conversations and hope this encourages people to really do join the conversation, because if God's prompting, he's doing something, and it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Amen to that. All right, friends. Well, this has been Coulda, Shoulda, Woulda. Until next time, we'll find out another time when someone coulda, shoulda, woulda does something differently. Tune in.